The Kid Who Would Be King is a family-friendly adventure movie that came out the past weekend. It has to do with King Arthur and Arthurian legend. So for those of you who aren't familiar with King Arthur, basically it's this old British folklore story about this king and his Knights of the Round Table, and they battle Morgana, who's like this evil half-sister of King Arthur. And then there's also Merlin, who's this wizard that helps King Arthur. And in this movie, this kid who's like 10 years old or something, and he's in London, he pulls the sword from the stone that is like in this construction site, and he is the heir to King Arthur, and Morgana is coming to take over the world, and it's up to this 10-year-old kid and his kooky band of friends to save the world. So this movie, I feel, is designed, and its target demographic is 10-year-old boys, and I thought maybe I would be able to still find some enjoyment in here, but I don't feel it transcends the age group, meaning if you're in that age group, you're probably going to love it, but anybody else will kind of probably get bored as the movie goes on, like I did. Now, this movie is directed by this guy, Joe Cornish. He wrote and directed this, and he also did 2011's Attack the Block, which is in many ways kind of similar to this movie because that one was also set in London, and it dealt with a whole bunch of kooky random characters in London that had to defend their block, their city, from some sort of weird invader. In that movie, it was aliens, and in this movie it is Morgana and her gang of weird creatures. This movie stars mostly a group of relative unknowns. I haven't seen a lot of these kids before, and I thought some of the kids were okay. So we got our lead is this guy, Louis Ashbourne, and his best friend in the movie is Dean Chaumoo, and they were okay. They weren't really spectacular. It kind of reminded me of the relationship between Peter Parker and his best friend in the Spider-Man Homecoming film, and I thought what worked in Spider-Man Homecoming a lot, and the friendship between them, and I thought the acting was like a lot stronger in that, whereas in this one, the characters are the same kind of archetypes, but there just doesn't really click. There's also these two other kids that are like bully kids that form up with the main kid in this movie, and they're played by this guy Tom Taylor and Rhianna, Doris, and they were horrible. I really did not like them. They start off the movie as complete jerks, and at the end of the movie, they're maybe less jerks, but they're still kind of jerks. Not much of a story arc there, and I really just hated their characters and was annoyed by them. There's also Patrick Stewart in this. He's the one actor I recognized. You know, Professor X, Captain Picard. Love this guy, but he was completely wasted in this. He plays like an older version of Merlin that pops up sometimes when Merlin wants to be taken seriously, but he looks like a disheveled homeless person in this that they dragged off the street. Like, such a weird costume choice. Why does Merlin look like this, you know? And if you for myself, I always imagine Merlin looking like this, sort of like looking like Gandalf with that white beard, and he didn't really have that in this. He just looked bad, and I really thought he was not good in this movie. And there's also a young Merlin, and that one is played by this guy, Angus Imrie. And this young Merlin, he's like a 16-year-old kid in a younger body, and he is the one glowing spot in this movie. I really liked this character and the way the kid played the character. So this young Merlin, he's like a pretty happy-go-lucky, fun guy, but he's like right out of the 15th century, and he's put in our current day in like a current teenager's body, and he doesn't know our cultural and societal norms, and he's all of a sudden thrown into this like elementary or high school or middle school. And he's trying to pretend to be a regular kid, but at the same time, he's like this wizard Merlin, and he has all these magical powers, and he's trying to bring this group of kids together. And he was just really, really funny. He played very exuberantly. Like, he was the one part of the movie I really did like.
Your carriage seems warm and dry. Take me east.
We also have the girl that played Morgana in this, and she was also completely wasted. Like, she was barely in this. She was always just kind of planning her attack, and then she finally did attack, and she was like barely on screen. Let me go to my pros before I really rail on this movie. So once again, like I said, I really liked young Merlin. He was great. There's a couple of good laughs in this, mostly with young Merlin, but there's some other funny scenes. One of them that I think was in the trailer, it's these kids kind of figuring out that they're sort of like King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and the kid's like, look, we're even sitting at a round table. And of course they pan down and it's not a round table, but then they're like, wait, put up the edges of the table, and then they put it up, and then it is a round table. I mean, it's kind of funny. They're just like in their kitchen, so it's not like this elaborate thing.
You're my knights, and this is the round table. Quick, Bedders, lift up the flaps.
Oh my god, you're such a nerd.
And there's just like a few jokes like that, and there's some fun stuff with magic and with the swords and playing with the swords and just these kids coming together for this adventure. There's some fun moments here, don't get me wrong. But on to my negatives. So like I said, Morgana was completely underutilized, and her bad guys were basically just these faceless skeletons that are on fire and are attacking everything, but they go down with like one swing of a sword, or if you hit them a little bit, like they crumble. And there's just a whole bunch of these faceless things, and they get destroyed so easily. I didn't understand what the bad guys, what Morgana was really trying to do. They kept teasing that she was coming to destroy the world, but like, what was really her plan to do that? She just kind of shows up, and then there's this big fight at this like middle school or high school at the end of the movie, and like, why does Morgana beating everybody at this high school mean she's going to just like own the world or something? Like, just horribly explained. I didn't think the writing was very good at like establishing really what the threat is and how it worked, and building to that like ending, that final battle. The overall writing wasn't very good. The movie was 2 hours long, when I think an hour 20 maybe would have been best, because 2 hours really kind of felt like a stretch of a runtime. And like I said, I didn't like a lot of the actors, with the exception of young Merlin in this. So overall, I just don't think there's that many redeeming qualities to this. I mean, I think if you are a 10-year-old boy, you will probably love this movie, and you'll probably give it like a 7 or 8 out of 10. But for myself, I'm going to give this one a 5.5 out of 10. There just really wasn't enough here for me to like. I kind of did enjoy the first half of the movie, but as we got into the back half of the movie, I just couldn't wait for this movie to be over. So yes, 5.5 out of 10 for me.